One musician blamed his band's lead singer for the onstage murder of his brother, while another has turned down $500,000 to reunite with his hated ex-bandmate. These are the musicians who, despite being in the same band, couldn't stand each other. But first, we need to talk about one of the most notoriously conflict-ridden bands in history, Van Halen. Brothers Eddie and Alex Van Halen formed the group in the early 70s, and were constantly at war with their fellow bandmates. Eddie in particular would often clash with frontman David Lee Roth over artistic and personal differences. Whereas Eddie was focused on composing innovative music, Roth was focused on being a celebrity and living the rock and roll lifestyle. Frustrated by constant clashes with Eddie, Roth left the band in 1985 to pursue a solo career. Eddie would later address the split in an interview with Rolling Stone, quipping, "Dave left to be a movie star. It's weird that it's over. I spent 12 years of my life putting up with his bullshit." The band intended to reunite with their former frontman in 1996, but the plans unraveled after Roth's cringeworthy behavior at that year's MTV Video Music Awards.
Have you noticed how things have changed a lot since the last time we were up here?
During the group's presentation of the Best Male Video Award, Roth repeatedly deviated from the script, basking in the crowd's admiration to boost his ego. A visibly irate Eddie Van Halen eventually had to forcefully pull Roth away from the microphone. After the pair nearly got into a fistfight backstage, the reunion was called off, and the rift between the two musicians only grew larger.
It wasn't his onstage antics, which for one I thought was embarrassing.
And disrespectful to Beck?
Very disrespectful to Beck, as he's trying to thank, people, his acceptance speech, whatever. Days behind him doing his shtick, and it's like, I don't know. To me, it was embarrassing.
However, Eddie would save his harshest words for former Van Halen bassist Michael Anthony, who was unceremoniously ousted from the group in 2004. Despite Anthony playing with Van Halen for over 30 years, Eddie labeled him as a garbage bass player and remarked, "Every note Mike ever played, I had to show him how to play. Before we'd go on tour, he'd come over with a video camera, and I'd have to show him how to play all the parts." These critical remarks prompted Sammy Hagar, Van Halen's second frontman, to defend Anthony via a scathing video response against Eddie.
For Eddie to say he had to show him what to play and had to teach him all those songs, that is the biggest line of I've ever heard in my life. Michael Anthony is a bad Eddie Van Halen for saying that about Mikey. You're a liar.
And while Eddie experienced a falling out with literally every single one of his bandmates, he and his brother Alex always had each other's backs, just like Pantera's founding brothers, Vinnie Paul and Dimebag Daryl Abbott. In the wake of Pantera's 2003 breakup, the brothers often bad-mouthed vocalist Phil Anselmo in the press and blamed him for the band's split. Anselmo eventually replied by infamously stating, quote, "Dimebag deserves to be beaten severely." 1 week later, while the Abbott brothers were performing with their newly formed band Damage Plan, Dimebag was tragically shot and killed on stage by a deranged Pantera fan. Vinnie Paul was playing drums only a few feet away and unfortunately witnessed the entire gruesome incident. Following the tragedy, Paul attributed Dimebag's death to Anselmo, claiming that the comments Anselmo made in the media had incited his brother's killer. Months later, Anselmo said he received a threatening message from Vinnie Paul.
And the conversation went something to the effect that my day's coming. And my rebuttal is, Vince, all of our day is coming, bro. And if my day happens to end earlier than your day, does that change anything? Will that change anything, or will you lose another brother?
Anselmo would eventually issue a public plea for Paul to forgive him and reform a friendship. However, Paul had no interest in reconciling with his former bandmate.
It said on Wikipedia that you stated that you're not interested and will never talk to Phil Anselmo again.
I'm not, and that's all we need to say about that.
Vinnie Paul Abbott passed away in 2018 without reconciling with Anselmo, carrying his grudge to the grave with him. Both Dimebag and Vinnie Paul were laid to rest in custom-made Kiss caskets, a band which has a tumultuous history of their own. In fact, two of the band's founding members, Ace Frehley and Peter Criss, appear to have been entirely removed from their legacy. Criss was ousted from the band in 1980, which was soon followed by Frehley's departure due to creative disagreements with band leaders Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley. In a controversial move, replacement members Tommy Thayer and Eric Singer even took over the makeup personas made famous by Frehley and Criss. In the years since, both Simmons and Stanley have gone out of their way to discredit their former bandmates in the press, with Simmons stating, "Ace and Peter made such horrible choices in their life, and they continue to make really bad choices, not just in terms of their health and what you ingest, but career choices." The band would even refuse to perform alongside Criss and Frehley at their 2014 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction.
Because if you saw people on stage who looked like Kiss but sounded like that, maybe we should be called Piss.
When Kiss held their final performance in December of 2023, many fans hoped to see an onstage reconciliation between the band's 4 original members. However, neither Ace Frehley nor Peter Criss received invitations to Kiss's last concert and were completely ignored throughout the night. This omission clearly indicated that their estrangement was indeed permanent. And while Kiss has had their fair share of internal disputes, they also stirred up drama within other bands. Like when Skid Row frontman Sebastian Bach accepted an opening slot for Kiss in 1996 without consulting the rest of the band, sparking one of rock music's most bitter feuds. At the time, the members of Skid Row felt that they were too big to open for Kiss and refused to tour with them. Bach would respond by calling guitarist Dave Snake Sabo's home and leaving a vulgar message on his answering machine.
Yeah, he answering machine. He didn't pick up, so I just went, "You mother," and I just let him know what I thought of them not letting me play with Kiss at the reunion tour of Kiss. Well, Dave said because he goes, "My whole family heard that message." He goes, "That came out of the speaker, and my whole family was there. It was Christmas because it was New Year's Eve."
Bach was subsequently fired from Skid Row, with Snake vowing he would never work with him again. Nevertheless, a Bachless Skid Row ironically ended up opening for Kiss only 4 years later. The band has since received many substantial offers to reunite with Bach, such as a $500,000 bid from the Sonosphere Festival in 2012. However, all these offers have been turned down by Snake.
I have no desire I'm not interested. None of us are. Again, it comes down to happiness. And we're really, really, really happy and where we're at.
In the summer of 2019, Bach revealed plans to perform Skid Row's debut album in full to mark its 30th anniversary, and extended an open invitation for the band to reunite on stage for the first time since their split. Snake, still seemingly harboring resentment, declined the offer, remaining steadfast in his vow to never collaborate with Bach again. The band still criticizes their ex-lead singer to this day, as bassist Rachel Bolan recently claimed that Bach did not contribute to Skid Row's biggest hits. An irritated Bach would address these allegations during one of his solo performances.
You might read online of my old bass player and the old guitar player, "Oh, we came up with 98% of that shit." Well, if you look at the credits, I co-wrote that last song, I'll have you know.
Nevertheless, Bach wasn't the only 80s rock singer to clash with his bandmates. In the early 90s, the rise of grunge signaled a shift in music trends, spelling trouble for hair metal bands as their popularity dwindled. In an attempt to keep up with the times, Motley Crue decided to abandon their signature sound and create an alternative rock album. However, it soon became evident that vocalist Vince Neil was not aligned with the decision, leading to an emergency band meeting in February of 1992, where Neil was shockingly voted out of the band.
You know, I really didn't like the direction that the music was going into, and I really wasn't enthused about it. I showed up at rehearsal, and everybody was upstairs waiting for me with our manager. They said, you know, you're not really enthusiastic about the music, and I go, yeah, you know, you're right about that. And they said, well, I think we're gonna start thinking about looking for a new singer. At first, I got angry. You know, that was my first reaction, and then I just said, well, if that's what you guys want, then go ahead.
Motley Crue went on to release their ill-fated grunge album with new singer John Corabi. Despite their best efforts, the album sold poorly, prompting the band's management to push for a reunion with Vince Neil to revive their declining career. And while Vince Neil eventually returned to Motley Crue, their worst crisis was yet to come. In April of 2023, founding guitarist Mick Mars would file a lawsuit against his bandmates, where he made a number of shocking allegations. Mars claimed that his former bandmates tried to force him out of the group in order to seize his share of the profits from the band's business interests. He further revealed that he was the only member of the band that still played his instrument live, as the rest of the group faked their performances with a backing track instead. Motley Crue retaliated with sworn statements from their road crew, detailing Mars's embarrassing mistakes during concerts, such as abruptly switching songs mid-performance and struggling to remember chords. While the issue remains embroiled in litigation, it's unlikely that the crew will ever get their original lineup back together, as Mars would tell Guitar World in February 2024 that a reconciliation with his ex-bandmates was, quote, past impossible. Mars went on to release a solo album amidst the controversy, which brings to mind the story of former Metallica bassist Jason Newsted. Despite being in the group for 15 years, Newsted never felt respected by band founders James Hetfield and Lars Ulrich. Not only did they relentlessly haze the bassist on tour, they also undermined his debut on a Metallica album by practically erasing his bass parts. Tensions escalated to a boiling point in January of 2001 after Newsted suggested that the band take a year-long hiatus so that he could focus on his side project Echo Brain. Hetfield immediately rejected the proposal and reprimanded Newsted for his interest in launching another band. According to the bassist, the whole experience made him feel like a child being scolded.
When it comes to a time where my main cat, James, tells me that basically he couldn't be in a band with me if I took this other project to this level. And after 15 years of working together and going buses and, you know, the stories, man. There was no way that this thing that I was doing could affect the monster of Metallica. I just don't see how it could.
Hetfield went too far when he forbade Metallica's managers from working with Echo Brain, resulting in Newsted's abrupt and dramatic exit from the band. The singer, however, soon acknowledged his error, describing the writing sessions that ensued after Jason Newsted's departure as unfulfilling, noting that the music fell short of its full potential. Hetfield ended up going to rehab as a result of the situation, with his personal crisis almost leading to the dissolution of Metallica. Of course, Hetfield's feud with former Metallica guitarist Dave Mustaine dates back much further. Although Mustaine served as Metallica's original lead guitarist, he was famously kicked out of the band in 1983 due to repeated drunken clashes with Hetfield. Mustaine went on to form the band Megadeth alongside bassist David Ellefson. Though the two once enjoyed a close friendship, considerable animosity developed between them over the years. Ellefson even went as far as to suggest that Mustaine never truly got over his ousting from Metallica and took his frustrations out on him. Mounting hostility eventually led Ellefson to sue Mustaine for $18.5 million in 2004, alleging the frontman was shortchanging him on profits. When the lawsuit was dismissed in 2005, Mustaine countersued, and the two eventually settled out of court. Ellefson returned to Megadeth in 2010, but was once again fired from the band in 2021 after explicit videos of himself and his mistress were leaked online. Further adding insult to injury, it was also announced that Ellefson's bass tracks for the band's upcoming album would be re-recorded by a new bassist.
He's obviously not gotten over this thing about being fired from Metallica. So he wanted to do to somebody else what he felt they did to him, which is kick him out, and then someone else played his guitar parts.
And if you thought that was bad, just wait until you learn about the tumultuous relationship between Ozzy Osbourne and Tony Iommi of Black Sabbath. Since their school days, Iommi harbored a strong loathing for Osbourne, who he considered to be a pest. While they eventually joined forces as bandmates, Ozzy's drunken antics often sparked physical confrontations between the two. The guitarist would note that, while each member of Black Sabbath was abusing drugs and alcohol during their heyday, Osbourne was on a different level altogether.
That it got to such a stage that something had to give, and I mean, and Ozzy was in a bad way at that time. He was in a terrible way. I mean, he'd be constantly on the couch, spark out, drunk or whatever. I mean, and none of us were a lot better, but I think we were probably not quite at the stage he was at that time.
Things came to a head when Sabbath entered the studio in 1979 to record their 8th studio album. Osbourne would show little interest in the songs, even refusing to sing the material the band had written for him. Facing label pressure and growing increasingly frustrated with the singer's lack of input, Iommi would subsequently kick Ozzy out of Black Sabbath. In his autobiography, Osbourne would recall, "I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel betrayed by what happened with Black Sabbath. We were 4 blokes who'd grown up together a few streets apart. We were like family, like brothers." Osbourne eventually sued Iommi, claiming he unlawfully took ownership of the Black Sabbath name and asserting his rights to a 50% stake in the trademark. Thankfully for fans, the two would eventually agree to discontinue court proceedings in 2010, and Black Sabbath reunited for a new album, as well as a world tour in 2012. In this next case, however, it truly seemed like the bitter rivalry amongst bandmates would last a lifetime. After years of conflicts with notorious Guns N' Roses lead singer Axl Rose, the band's guitarist Slash would ultimately leave the group in October of 1996. According to band manager Doug Goldstein, their relationship fell apart when Slash agreed to work with Michael Jackson. Goldstein would recall, "I told him not to do it because Axl was by his father when he was 2, and he believed the charges against Michael Jackson. When Axl found out Slash was going to play with Michael Jackson, he was devastated. He thought Slash would support him and be against all abuse." From Axl's point of view, that was the only problem. He could ignore the drugs and the alcohol, but never the allegations against Jackson. Slash added that Axl's need for absolute control was a point of contention for him, claiming that he and the rest of his bandmates were forced to sign over their stake in the name Guns N' Roses under duress.
It wasn't even me necessarily leaving the band. It was not continuing on with the new band that Axl put together that he was now at the helm of, which was the new Guns N' Roses, and I was, given a contract to basically join his new band.
Nevertheless, after nearly 20 years of bitterness, Slash and Axl reconciled in July of 2015. It was later revealed that Slash and bassist Duff McKagan would return to Guns N' Roses for the Not in This Lifetime tour, which took its name from a 2012 interview where Rose, in response to questions about a potential reunion, famously said, "Not in this lifetime." And while Slash and Axl seem to get along just fine these days, there is still a lingering sense of animosity between Aerosmith singer Steven Tyler and guitarist Joe Perry.
Just shut up and leave me alone now.
During the band's heyday, the pair earned the nickname of the Toxic Twins due to their rampant partying both on and off stage. Their indulgent lifestyle eventually impeded the band's creative process and caused a growing strain in the duo's relationship. Perry would criticize Tyler for prioritizing women and fame over music, whereas Tyler would condemn Perry for coming across as standoffish and distant. Perry would even infamously tell Tyler, "Just because we're in a band together doesn't mean we have to be friends." Things finally came to a head in July of 1979, when a backstage altercation involving Perry's wife ultimately resulted in the guitarist's departure from the band. Aerosmith's career struggled without Perry, who eventually rejoined the group almost a decade later, leading to a successful comeback tour in 1984. Nevertheless, Tyler and Perry remain as toxic as ever, even getting into it on stage. much like Bruce Dickinson and Steve Harris of Iron Maiden, who were recently involved in an onstage squabble when Harris didn't take kindly to Dickinson's pranks. The duo has a long-standing history of conflict, particularly during the production of their sixth album, Somewhere in Time, back in 1986. Dickinson's material was rejected by Harris, deeming it below Iron Maiden's standard. The album notably lacked any songwriting contributions from Dickinson, with Harris suggesting the singer had lost the plot after an extensive world tour. The relationship between the two grew increasingly contentious over the years, culminating in Dickinson leaving the band in 1993 to pursue a solo career. Despite rejoining Iron Maiden in 1999, tensions between Dickinson and Harris persist. The singer would sum up their relationship by telling Louder Sound magazine, "Steve is extremely determined and he's got quite a ruthless streak in him. He can be very, very stubborn, and of course, so can I." And while the next band we'll discuss is arguably the most well-known, they are also the most miserable, as musical superstars' journey seemed to be constantly embroiled in drama due to the deteriorating relationships within the group. Despite lending his vocals to the band's most iconic song, Don't Stop Believin', singer Steve Perry parted ways with the band in a contentious manner on 2 separate occasions. Even still, Journey guitarist Neil Schon has openly expressed his desire for a reunion with Perry, inviting him to join him on stage multiple times. However, Perry would tell Rolling Stone that he could not imagine working with Schon ever again, or even re-establish their friendship. He added, "I left the band 31 years ago, my friend. You can still love someone, but not want to work with them. And if they only love you because they want to work with you, that doesn't feel good to me." These days, Schon is engaged in a legal dispute with Journey keyboardist Jonathan Cain over the band's credit card. In 2022, Cain faced a lawsuit from Schon for limiting his access to Journey's Amex card. In response, he accused Schon of extravagant spending of the band's funds, highlighting $1 million in personal expenses for himself and his wife. In retaliation, Schon would push to replace Cain with former Journey keyboardist Greg Raleigh. However, his bandmates opposed this, prompting Shun's wife to upload a scathing social media post insinuating that both Cain and lead singer Arnel Pineda were the ones who were against Raleigh's comeback. Unsurprisingly, Pineda did not take kindly to these comments and would respond by stating that Schon was more than welcome to fire him from the band. Schon subsequently blasted Pineda on Twitter, calling him a pathological liar and a narcissist, proving that he still isn't able to get along with singers.